So our agenda today, we're going to do some brief introductions. We'll talk about the APR, the annual performance report, the nuances around it as far as when it's due, the reporting period, what's collected, what's expected. We'll talk some about the data elements that affect the annual performance report, specifically universal data elements, which everyone is required to collect if you're contributing to an HMIS or comparable database. Program-specific data elements, which are particular to a certain funding type or maybe a component of that funding type. We'll talk about the tool used to actually send in your APR or upload your APR, go over a few little tips and tricks around the APR, and then be open for questions. We'll have a few minutes at the end for that. So real quick introductions. My name is Eric Gammons. I work for the Technical Assistance Collaborative based out of Boston. However, I live down in South Louisiana and have been down here for a number of years, where I served as the CoC chair, as the HMIS lead, ran a big Catholic charities with all the homeless programs you can imagine, from emergency shelter, street outreach, all the way to PSH and rapid rehousing. In addition, I also worked for Volunteers of America down here, where I was the housing director. So I've seen a lot of different variations of homeless programs and definitely have a pretty good understanding of what's expected around reporting. As far as people attending, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, include your name, agency, and types of program services you provide or utilize. So right off the bat, the CoC Program Annual Performance Report. It's a requirement of HUD recipients of the CoC program. Along with that, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, YHDP, which I believe you have one in your CoC. And if you're receiving special NOFO funds like the unsheltered or rural homelessness funding, you also are required to submit an APR. And just along with that, understand that if you're receiving ESG funding, the ESG recipient, which typically is the state, or maybe you have an entitlement in your state, they are also required to submit sort of an APR. It's called the CAPR, but it's basically the same thing as far as data is concerned, client level data. HUD uses the APR to track the progress and performance of their grants under the CoC program. It's really the primary performance measure for your project specifically, but also know that the same data elements, the same information that goes into your APR is aggregated up to a CoC level for CoC level wide reporting. And what do I mean by that? Well, specifically the LSA, which used to be called the AHAR, still is, but we all call it the LSA now, and the system performance measures, which are really important for CoCs as far as their scoring when they're applying for funding. So you populate the annual performance report into SAGE, so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of this training. And again, you'll see a little piece. Recipients of YHDP funds are encouraged to review the YHDP reporting guidance because it is different than a normal CoC grant. You have some quarterly reporting. If you do have a YHDP grant, you're probably familiar with this already. The quarterly reporting is pretty exhausting. So it's once you learn how to do quarterly reporting, you're pretty close to being able to do your APR. And again, if you have a special NOFO, which I don't believe there was one, there's specific guidance around special NOFO that is a lot different than what I'm going to cover today. So there's 4 different types of CoC APR that can be found in that SAGE tool I mentioned and that we'll cover. The CoC full APR, which includes components, transitional housing, sorry for the acronyms here, permanent supportive housing, supportive services only, and rapid rehousing. There's an HMIS APR. Now that HMIS APR is very specific to HMIS dedicated grants. So if you don't have an HMIS dedicated grant, you do not complete an HMIS APR. Typically, the grantee for that dedicated grant is your HMIS lead. And you may have some HMIS money in your grant, but that doesn't make it a dedicated grant. I'd ask your collaborative applicant for more details if you're confused by that. The CoC planning grant, there should be only one, and that's for the collaborative applicant to complete. And there's a coordinated entry APR. So that's for all CoC grantees that receive SSO coordinated entry funding. So that's a specific type grant, and they have to submit an APR for that grant, although it does cover the system-wide coordinated entry system. Sorry, I said system twice. And Just remember that if you're a victim service provider and don't contribute to an HMIS, that doesn't mean you don't have to submit an APR. You're drawing that data for your APR from your comparable database system. It's important to know if that comparable database system can generate that APR, specifically the upload that goes into Sage. And again, I'm not going to repeat this, but there's also a couple other APRs, the YHTP and the special NoFo. So let's start looking at pieces of the APRs. Right, the most important thing of all, the operating start date. When did your project start, and what's the project year? So it's pretty easy. If you're a renewal grant, your operating start date is the first day after your last grant. So if it ends December 31st, your next operating start date, of course, is January 1st. It's incredibly important if you have a new grant to know when your start date is. It can often be confusing, and I've done TA across the country, worked with a lot of folks completing APRs, and that start date often is incorrectly put into ELOCs, which is hard to change once you do it. So it's again very important to know what your operating start date is. If you need it corrected and you did it wrong, talk to your HUD field office. The real key with operating start date is it's the first month that you're operating and spending money and serving participants. It's not when you did ELOCs. It's not when you signed the grant. It's none of those things. It's that first month that you begin serving people and expending funds from the grant. So when you're thinking about your APR, it's important to know the timelines. If you're waiting till when your APR is due to work on your APR, it's going to be a lot harder and might not be as accurate as you would like it to be. So we always recommend you do easy monthly data entry quality checks, just basically running a report, an APR report, but just for that month, whatever month it is, and looking at the data to make sure that the data quality is good. Again, about 90 days before the report's due is typically when Sage will open the report for you, and you're able to run sample reports. You can upload as many reports as you want into Sage and look at that data, or you can look at it on your HMIS system if it produces a readable APR for you. Not sure what vendor you use, but you should be able to do that. Make sure you can access Sage. That's a big one. And then just keep in mind there's several parts to the APR, so it's nice to be able to work on each part separately, get it done, move to the next part. There's financials, there's performance, there's some new eligibility forms in there. So lots of different things to do just besides the data upload. Again, try to get that data quality fixed first, because that's the hardest to do once you wait 2 or 3 months down the road. And then one of the most important things is make sure your finance folks have submitted all their invoices and ELOCs before you work on the financial piece of the report. So let's talk about the data in the APR, because I think a lot of people always wonder, like, where did these numbers come from? So first of all, why is data important? Well, of course, it's important for your project to be able to report to HUD about the performance you did, how many people you served, what does that population you serve look like? Did they increase income? Did they increase non-cash benefits? Some other pieces that are important for them. How long were they in their program? And what was the destination when they exited? Did they move into housing, or did they move back into homelessness, or some other arrangement? And HUD takes all that in when it reviews your grants and decides if this grant might need to be monitored or not, to be honest with you. So CoC level reporting. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the same data that goes in your APR goes into the CoC system-wide reporting, the LSA system performance measures. So that same data that's being used for your APR is also used for your CoC system-wide reporting. Potentially, your state could be reporting out numbers for homelessness, and they may use that information also, especially if it's ESG CAPER related. And then federal reporting, of course, HUD reports to the administration, to Congress, about who's being served, how many is being served, all the same questions, but just on a national scale. But your same data from your APR goes into that federal reporting. So again, tips for reviewing data. Don't wait till the report is due. I think I covered all this already. Involve program experts in report preparation. Remember, there's several components to the report. You may be excellent in one section, but you might not know the finance side, or you might not know the data quality side, but you know the performance side, or you know the eligibility side. So it's like you all pitch in, whoever knows what contributes to the report to make it more accurate and reflect the great work you've been doing. So let's look at what's collected when we start talking about participant level data. So we collect the universal data elements. I'll go over those in a second. We collect project level data elements. The difference between these two is universal data elements. If you're contributing to an HMIS, you have to collect that data. Project level is more specific, again, to your funding source or component. And then your continuum of care may ask you to collect some extra data elements that are not included in the HUD mandated data set. So why it's collected, I kind of went over that. Primarily, it's a HUD requirement, but know that your CoC or maybe other systems or consolidated plan in your city or in your state or even other folks your data may inform their design, project design, may inform their services, may help with modeling, system modeling on a CoC-wide basis. So it has a lot of uses. It's also a great talking point if you're raising funds, just different things you can do with that data in its aggregate form. So when do we collect data? Well, of course, when the person enrolls in the system or engagement updates. So here's a thing that we'll talk a little bit more about further down, but those updates are super important, especially moving forward. Annual assessments and an exit, or when the person leaves the project or household leaves the project. And then who do we collect the data on? Well, it really depends on what the question we're asking is, but we ask adults and children, and heads of household. We either, if a question requires us to ask all the questions, all the populations, then we do, but sometimes like move-in date is only for the head of household. So it's not, we don't have to collect all this data on everybody all the time. So here's those universal data elements. So we also used to have gender in here, but it's been removed. It's been replaced by sex. However, sex is not a universal data element, so don't get those too confused. It didn't really replace it. It's just instead of, sort of. So that's why you don't see sex in this list. And just moving forward, so what you're looking at, here's a screenshot of that Sage tool. I just wanted to quickly show you this. We'll dig a little bit deeper into Sage later on, but this shows you, and I blacked out some of the identifiable information from this particular APR. So that's what those gray boxes are, in case you're wondering. But you'll see at the top, it's a rapid rehousing project. This is an APR report. You'll see the reporting period, which is really what I wanted you to pay attention to. And then my user level is the data viewer, but that's not really important. But the important thing here is, like, there's a couple of things when you look at this to make sure they're right before you even get started with your APR. Number one, make sure your project ID is accurate. As far as HMIS goes, that's an HMIS ID number, right? Make sure that you have the right type of projects. So 13 is rapid rehousing. You'll see, permanent housing, and you'll see that rapid rehousing subtype is 2, meaning it's a rapid rehousing project. More importantly, it's that report start date and report end date. Make sure those dates are correct. And if they're not, then that's the time to reach out to your HUD field office, because those dates come from ELOCs, which whoever's in charge of your finances and doing your invoices for your CoC projects is familiar with. So that's where those dates come from. And then you'll see a couple other numbers. So once you see this open up, you'll be able to edit it and actually look at your APR. So a couple just real quick reminders. In the APR, they have some strange groups of people or cohorts of people. Two groups are leavers and stayers. So leavers are just folks that were in your project, either at the beginning of the reporting period or entered your project during the reporting period, and they exited before the end of the reporting period. Therefore, they do not have an open enrollment on the last day. Where stayers, Similar situation, except they don't have an exit, or at least their last enrollment doesn't have an exit. Therefore, they have an open enrollment on the last day of the period. I kind of already went over project start date, like where to look for it. So keep in mind, I'm sorry, this is project start date. So project start date is when the individual or the household enters your project. And it's different depending on what component project do you have. For street outreach, it's that date you made first contact with the person. So that's really kind of like, really? Because I might just wave at them. Is that the start date? Not really. I mean, so the thing is, have a discussion with your CoC. You want to be consistent. If you have street outreach projects, which they're rare, but there are some, you want to be consistent about what you consider the first contact. Is it when you first have that first conversation with them? Like, what is it? But be consistent. With the rest, it's pre-written in stone. As far as transitional housing, it's when they moved in, right? For permanent housing projects, it's when you enroll a person in the project and they've accepted that enrollment. Not when they moved into housing, not any of the other stuff. It's we're going to accept you in our PSH, and the household says, okay, we want to be in the PSH. That's enrollment date. Same with wrap housing. And then the for just other support services only, generally it's going to be that first day you started working with that person or household. So project start date's super important. Just letting you know, I see a lot of data quality issues around project start dates. And here's where the real confusion comes in. Is like project start date, housing move-in date. What's the difference? Well, the big difference is one's an enrollment and one's when they get the keys and walk through their front door of their house. So can they be the same date? Absolutely. Typically, they're not, though, unless you're enrolling people and housing them on the same day, and then they will be the same date. So if we open up our APR after we've uploaded it, or if you're looking at the APR on your HMIS system, if it provides that sort of a reporting ability to be able to read it, you're going to be looking at the first four numbers of the APR, and then the APR is numbered. So you'll see Q5, Q6, sometimes you'll see subs, Q5A, Q5B, Q5C. It's just different parts of the APR, and it's important to know how to read it and what you're looking at. So first of all, that first piece, that Q1 through 4, is just your project description, similar to what we just looked at. It talks about the type of project, start and end dates, or the project start and end date, and some other pieces that we talked about. The very next section, Q5A, is your validations table. Now that sounds weird, but really this is the table that shows you like who's been in your program as far as how many folks have been in your project, and then what they look like as far as, are they adults, are they veterans, are they children? Like it just breaks down that population you're serving. And this is key, y'all. So you'll see I highlighted 3 different areas. The first one is total number of persons served. Now that's persons, not households. And that's important to know the distinction between those two, especially if you're doing some sort of rental assistance or you have a PSH or wrap housing, because your rent roll may be 10, but you might be serving 30 people because of the size of the households. But it is important to know like total number of persons served, and you'll see count of clients for DQ and count of clients. What the heck does that mean? Well, it just means that specifically around street outreach, night-by-night shelters, which are not CoC programs, I know, but you're not necessarily required to collect all the data on the household until you've reached an engagement with that household. So between that first contact and that engagement, those folks don't have a data quality expectation, and that's why you have those 2 separate columns. So I typically use count of clients for DQ because that's what makes more sense. That's the ones I'm expected to collect client level data on. You also see number of leavers. So that's folks that exited during the reporting period, and number of stayers. That's the folks that were still in your project at the last day of your reporting period. So it's important to compare those numbers with what you think they should be. So right off the bat, because you need to make sure that everybody's in this report that should be in this report. before you work on any other data quality, right? So let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the data elements that really affect your APR negatively or positively, whichever way you want to look at it. So the date of birth for me is one of the most significant data elements we collect. Well, that can be important. Why is that important? Because the date of birth establishes the age of the person. And we need to know the age of the person because HUD and its reporting process divides everybody up into adults only, adults with children, children only. That's the big three groups. All the other reports come off of that, and we'll see that in the APR too. Also true with the LSA. That's just how it divides it up. So how can you tell somebody is an adult or a child? You need to know their age. So that's what makes date of birth so important. Keep in mind that you want the date of birth to be exact or to be right, but even if it isn't, it's okay to have them approximate their date of birth if they can't remember what it is. You're really looking for a month and a year, right? Just to be able to set that age. Sometimes it's a holiday. I mean, sometimes I've seen where people can't remember their birthday or can't remember their kid's birthday. It's like, was it cold? Was it warm? Was it Christmas? Was it some other holiday? Like, try to get as close as you can to get that date, but just don't leave it blank if the person doesn't know. So again, I covered this. This is really what we're looking for when it comes to APR and date of birth. We need to know the number of children under 18. We're also looking at use, right? So 24, 18 to 24, and the number of adults age 24 and above. So again, when we're looking at persons in households without children, we just want to make sure that there's no children in the household, which again, pretty easy to explain. Just have to have that approximate age or the exact age, or you just cannot build out these household reports. And basically, the folks that don't have a birth date are going to be set to the side. They're going to be in a separate column and not part of your actual APR. And I'll show you that just in a second. So here, notice we've gone back to the APR, and we're on question 6A, which is data quality. So again, data quality, why do I need to see this? Well, this is showing you for the rest of your report what's not going to be accurate if you have data quality issues. So I mentioned running an APR once a month to check on data quality. This is really the areas of the APR you're going to be looking at first. Like, do I have good data quality for my project around date of birth? Do I have good quality around veteran status, right? Is my project start dates all in there? They should be, but are they all in there? So a couple other things I didn't highlight: name, social security number, race, ethnicity. So those are not going to affect the performance of your grant, of your project. Yes, they're important. They allow you to de-identify, but it doesn't affect reporting and performance of this actual report. That's why I didn't highlight them. In addition, you'll see I highlighted relationship to the household. We'll talk about why that's important. And disabling condition. Again, disabling condition is pretty important, especially if you have a permanent supportive housing project where the eligibility requirement is being disabled. Are we good so far? Any questions? Rosa, all good on your end?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see anything, so I didn't want to make sure I wasn't talking to the air. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about another data element that's really important besides date of birth is relationship to head of household. I've seen this skipped quite a bit. I don't know why. It's just as important as all the rest, if not more, but this is what puts households together. So it identifies who the head of household is. There are certain data collection requirements for the head of household that don't exist for anybody else. So you identify the head of household, and by identifying the head of household and connecting everybody else to it, that's what creates your household. So super important. The reporting tool and the way the report is generated relies on this data element heavily. So it's important that every client you serve has head of household, the relationship to head of household completed. Slide. There you go. Another important one, which this might not play as big of as importance, but certainly you have to have it. It's mandated, is the client location, which is just the CoC code for the participant's location. My understanding is Rhode Island just has the one CoC code. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the chat. But so that's pretty easy to know what the answer is. But again, it's super important for the reporting, because the way the reporting, the way the APR is produced, it looks for that CoC code before including the household into the project's APR. Typically, it does that. Not all vendors, but most of them. So just review real quick what adults and children are, because we're going to talk a lot about adults and children. Most information on the APR is now reported on both adults and children. And so HUD just defines those as adult is 18 years or older, child is under the age of 18. Unaccompanied child is an individual under 18 with a household size of 1. So important there. And then a youth is any person under the age of 25. So that's like a subset, right? It includes some adults and some children in that set, but is important for YHDP reporting and for your modeling or planning in the future. So we're back to the APR again, as you might recognize, and now we're on question 7A. You can see, so it's the number of persons served. Now remember, we saw that initial question 5, which reported on people served or people in your project. Now it's breaking it down a little bit more, and lo and behold, look how it breaks it down. Adults without children, households without children, households with children and adults, and households with only children. And then you have this outlier on the right, unknown household type. Well, why is that? Well, if you have folks in there, primarily it's because you don't have a date of birth for an individual, and that's why they're being included in that column, because they don't know their age, they can't tell if they're an adult or a child, so they automatically just put them in the unknown household type. I know that sounds strange, but that's just the way the APR works. You also see at the bottom for PSH and rapid rehousing, total persons served who moved into housing. So that's your first chance at performance. It's like, let me see, I can see number of persons that have actually moved in who I may be paying rent for, but are certainly inside, either in a tent-based rental assistance or project-based assistance. And then below in Q7B, here's something else. What is this? It's the point in time count for the last Wednesday of every quarter. How many folks do you have in your project? That's kind of random, but it turns out it's really important, because that's how HUD is looking at utilization. You said you would serve a certain number of people. Did you serve that number of people on these 4 nights? And how close were you? That information is actually going to be imported to a different part of your APR report, where you're going to have to explain utilization, especially if it was low. So again, I've covered this already, but this is just the household types. Pretty easy to understand. One thing to remember is if you have a lady who is pregnant, she's still considered a household without children until she gives birth to the child. That comes from the HUD data standards. In addition, I mean, that's really it. Pretty easy to understand. So we looked at that question 7A, which was persons. Well, as you know, I mentioned earlier, if you're doing rental assistance, have a PSH, rapid rehousing, some type of project, even transitional housing where you have group setting, you could have households instead of people that you're more concerned about. And so Q8A talks about households, talks about the total number of households that were in your project during the reporting year, and then what those breakdowns are, again, in those 3 sets, right? Without children, with children and adults, and with only children. And again, that outlier you never want anybody to be in. Unknown housing type, which get back to being related to age, which is the date of birth question. And you also have your point of times for your last Wednesday of every quarter. How many households were in your project? Really important. If you said you were going to provide rental assistance for 20 people, like this looks pretty good, right? 20, 17, 16, 21. You're going to have turnover. You're not expected to be at full capacity 100% of the time, but you really want to be close to what you said you were going to serve as far as capacity of your project. All right, moving on to more important data elements. This one causes people a lot of issues. More often now than before, because there's a new section in the APR that requires some explanation of this data element if you're not completing it correctly. So prior living situation is just like, where did you sleep last night, or where are you today, and where are you going to sleep tonight? Like, that's basically it. Establishing that the person's homeless, right? Need that eligibility piece. CoC projects need to be homeless for the most part. And like, are you eligible for this program based on your prior living situation? So it's important, incredibly important, that your data quality on this piece is correct. Is it accurately reflecting where that person was the night before they entered your project, right? So there's some conditional secondary selections with this, but more importantly, what we're worried about is like, is it a homeless setting, or is it a setting that would make you eligible for the project you're running this report on? Again, I have a lot of extras in here, like when do you do it? Who do you do it with? Head of households and adults. And there is a list, and the list is located in not many places at the moment. So there's a 2024 data element, let me see what it's called, the HMIS data elements guide for CoCs. I think it's still available. A lot of things have been taken down, unfortunately, but I do have, let me drop this in the chat. This is the latest and greatest that you can look at when it comes to data elements. And basically, it's just a live version of your data element collection requirements, but does talk in depth about prior living situation, how to ask the question, what are your answers, all the caveats. Really long. I probably could do an hour just on this one data element. So, but if you go to that site, I dropped in the chat, you can see a pretty good definition if it works for you. And that's just the same as I have at the bottom of the slide. So when it comes to that data element and how it's reported on the APR, well, of course, they couldn't call it the same thing. So they just call it living situation. But it's question 15. It's prior living situation. And this is where you go to make sure that the folks you served in your project were eligible, but also that you collected them correctly. So immediately, if I look at this project in front of us right now, I'm looking at a couple of folks that came from a detox center, came from jail, prison, or juvenile detention facility. I'm probably going to need to know how long they were there, right? Because that has a lot to do with whether they were homeless or not. So ring, ring, ring. I'll need to find out who those folks were. Now, hopefully your system can pull this report up and it's clickable so you can identify who that person is or who that household is. If not, it takes a little bit more effort. You may have a data quality tool built into your system that you can use to find who these folks are, because your APR doesn't have any personal identifiable information in it. What you submit into Sage doesn't have any any PII. It's just aggregate data. So you really have to go back to your HMIS system to try to figure out who those folks were. So you see at the top, homeless situations, they're really highlighted here in bold, the different groupings that they have. Homeless situations, you're automatically going to be eligible, right? But institutional settings, you may need some explanation. And then as you go down this list, I thought I had one more. I don't know what happened to it. Oh. So along with question 15, you also have a length of time between project start date and housing move-in. I know for PSH and Rapid Housing projects, this is incredibly important. How long does it take from the time you enroll somebody to the time you move them into housing? So just, you'll see it gives you the average length of time to housing in days. Really a good measure, especially if you look at your system performance measures for your CoC. How do I compare with that number? Or is it taking me a lot longer? Or am I a lot quicker? If I'm quicker, maybe you want to emulate what you're doing. But it also could depend on the population you serve or the geographic area you're serving, how long it takes for somebody to move in. But that's another good question to look at. So let's go. I'm not sure why that slide got mixed up, but let's look at project exit date and destination, back to where we were. So now we're looking at performance, right? So How many people did you serve? How long were they in your project? How long did it take for them to move into housing? And now it's like, what was the result of them being in your project? Did it improve their housing situation? That's really what we need to know here. So you have a project exit date. I rarely find people that struggle with when their exit date should be. However, if you have a night by night, which is an ESG program probably, or if you have any street outreach being paid for by the CoC, then sometimes that exit date can be hard to determine. Like, how long do I wait after how long do I wait not seeing somebody before I exit them, right? If I'm providing street outreach or some other SSO and then my client disappears, it's like, how many days, weeks, months do I wait before I do an exit date? So there is some caveats to exit date. It's not just all written in stone. And the CoC generally will establish some sort of standard around that. If they don't, then certainly as a project, you should have some standard written down that says, yeah, after 7 days or after 30 days of no contact, we exit the person from the program. Move-in day, I think we're all familiar with move-in day or destination. Again, destination uses that same list as prior living situation. Kind of interesting. It's the same list. So, and you're able to look at that list back in the data standards. It's hard to see where you look for stuff now because a lot of stuff is hidden. But back in that data standards that I dropped in the chat, you should be able to find this particular data element, and it's going to provide you the list of all the places you can come from or go to. And so, but it's so when you're talking about performance around a project, this is really it, right? This is like, where did the person exit to? What was their housing status when they exited? So it's important that that one's correct, or it's going to look like you're not really doing what you said you were going to do by moving people from homelessness to housing. Also remember, same data is being used for your system performance measures. Same data is being used for your LSA. So what you have in your APR is also reflective in your CoC system-wide reports. Pretty important stuff. Yeah, so the slides got mixed up. I'm not sure how. So again, this is back to that exit destination, really showing where folks are going, right? So I exited the homeless situations, same list, into institutional settings, temporary situations, like these are where folks are exiting to. At the bottom, you'll see more of the permanent tenure stuff where you kind of want to have your folks exited to, right? And then you'll see way at the bottom, again, this is question 23C, exit destination. At the bottom, you're going to see total persons exiting to positive housing destinations, highlighted. It's not highlighted on yours, but I just did that for you, so it's easy to find. Basically saying, look how many folks that exited our project went into a permanent housing situation or a positive housing destination. And then you'll see some right below it that says, hey, these people were excluded from the calculation, and that could be for a number of reasons. In this case, it's pretty easy to see somebody died while they were in the project, so they're not included in performance because you really, hopefully did not have any control over that situation. So while you're looking at the APR, you're going to realize there's a whole lot more to the APR than what I just covered as far as your data collection goes, because the APR, when you do the upload, also includes sections on veterans, youth, and chronically homeless. If your project is specific to one of those populations, then that part of the APR is equally as important. Just know that it's the same APR, right? It's just only now counting folks that meet one of those definitions. So the youth APR just has youth in it. Veteran APR just has veteran counts in it. So similar to your whole APR, but broken down by these populations. All right, talk a little bit about participant level, program-specific data elements, and I'm going back. And how are we doing, Rosa? Everything good?
Good.
Good, thank you. So let's talk about some program-specific data elements. Again, these are data elements that are not required by every project, like the universal data elements, but they are important, especially for CoC-funded programs. And this is just a few of them. And you'll see here in this nice little chart that no longer exists, on the HUD Exchange, but you can use it as you might. So it tells you what the collection requirements are for each one of the components in the CoC world. So, oh, and there's prevention in there. That's interesting. Okay. So just to know that you'll see those 4.02 number all the way to 4.20. That's just the number of the data element. It does not correspond with the APR. But I wanted to just show you a quick, like, these are all the things that have to be collected. It's quite a bit. In addition, I mentioned the new sex data element. It's 4.21. So, and there's also a couple of PSH specific data elements called moving on assistance provided and youth education status. So they're not included in this because they're fairly new. But again, specific to CoC projects. When it comes to looking at your APR, really you want to look at income as being a primary guider here, and income is the money coming into your household, like how much money are they getting, and then while they're in your project, did that stay the same and or improve? Like that's really what you're looking at. So it's important to know a couple things. Number one, you only collect on head of households and adults. Children can't have income as far as the data elements go. I find that this is that one that folks, when they collect it, they ask it at the enrollment, but then they never ask again. Even when they see the person get a job, or maybe they get SSI or some other form of income, it's like once you find out somebody's income has increased, like collect that data in HMIS. Your HMIS leader system admin should be able to help you with that process if they haven't already. But it's so important to continue collecting income on an ongoing basis while somebody's in your project, because really the examination is when they enrolled, what was their income? When they left, what was their income? And the expectation is they have at least the same or more income at exit. This information not only affects your project's performance, but again, that whole CoC-wide reporting, right? The system performance measures, the LSA, all get affected by this information. Non-cash benefits, another one similar to income, where you're looking at folks receiving benefits that are not cash related. That includes food stamps. Food stamps is not cash, or SNAPs, I should say. And once again, you want to collect at the beginning, and you want to collect it during when it changes, and then you want to collect it at the end, because that's where that microscope hits, right? It's like what were they getting at the beginning, and what were they getting at the end? And it should be the same or more. Is your project performing as far as improving that household's abilities to be sustainable without your services? Health insurance, another one. Some of the health insurance is connected to your income sources, so pay attention to that. It's a good data quality check. The person has SSI, they typically going to have Medicaid, just one of those rules. So I'm going through these kind of quick because we have a lot of slides, but just the same sort of piece with health insurance, how it impacts everything. Does it impact your system-wide performance measures? Not necessarily, but certainly it's equally important to see how well your project is to linking folks up with eligible insurance they may want. And then disabilities, this one's a big one, especially if you're running a PSH project where disability is an eligibility piece. And so making sure that this is answered correctly is very important. Certainly establishes who you're serving, maybe not so much a performance measure, but again, it's a who you're serving. And if disability was an eligibility piece, were they eligible? That's a big catch. I see a lot of HUD field offices rejecting APRs because it's specific, it's a PSH project, but yet they don't indicate that their head of households or other adults are disabled in the household. So not everybody's disabled, therefore somebody must not be eligible, or there's a data quality issue. And this is just a list of the disabilities currently. And to see what that looks like on the APR, oh wait, I got one more. Lastly is domestic violence. Again, not necessarily a performance piece, potentially could be an eligibility piece if you said you were only going to serve this particular population. This one's a little tricky as far as data collection goes. Just be aware that, don't always want to ask this question just with all the other questions. You might have somebody move into a private location. You may make sure they're not with somebody when they're trying to answer this question, or you don't want to ask the question. What I always recommend, and I have at the bottom of the slide, yeah, talk to some folks that do this for a living. Like, what's the best way to handle this? I always recommended, hey, you should ask this question at the very beginning of your enrollment to make sure this person doesn't need to seek out assistance in a victim service provider that can keep their information more private. So really this is all conversational pieces. This is a required data element, though you are required to ask it. Just some keys around being careful when you ask the question. So let's talk about Sage. So Sage is where once you go into your HMI system, you collect all this data for your report. You got your reporting period, can be a month, can be a year. For your official APR, it's going to be a year or annually. But remember, you can run these reports as often as your HMI system will allow. I always recommend running it at least monthly. So this Sage reporting site, which is sagehmis.info, if you haven't seen it already, highly recommend you get on the site because you don't even need a user login to use some of it. So there's a test report output, which will allow you to upload your APR without even having a user license, without anything, right? If you have the upload from your HMI system, you can test it in this site with nothing else, and it'll show you if it was accepted, and it'll show you some baseline numbers of number of people that it was served, sort of like that question 5A from the APR. But then you can ask it to drill down and look at more. And if you do that, it'll show you the APR, just like I was showing you, just like it shows up in the normal Sage process. So really kind of neat, because I don't need to be a director to do this. I just need to be able to create that upload out of my HMI system, and then I can look at it, right? No user required. But if you do want to be a user of Sage and you are going to take part in uploading or in working on the APR, or even just looking at the APR, then there's a process to do it that's found in the Sage manual, but it's basically going to ask you what CoC, and then it's going to ask you what your position is. So unless you work for the Continuum of Care or a collaborative applicant or some other, maybe a board member or something like that, you're generally going to be a recipient of CoC. So not the Continuum of Care. That's the important thing to know, because that'll give you the role that will enable you to look at your project. So once you've created a user account, and you've been connected with your CoC or your project or your agency, this is the screen you get. And so the important thing to know about this screen, number one, is that there's a guidance and resource button, and that has all the things you need on it. So these are all the references, depending on what type of project you have. You click on one of these, brings you to the guidebook, helps you walk through the process. It's not poorly written. I think they're rather written well, to be honest with you. I know some instructional guides can be hard to read, but these are pretty good. And then there's some other materials on the right side, again, more specific to certain things, but mainly how to use Sage itself. But really good. There's also Ask a Question, which is, just links to the AAQ directly. So really some nice resources. Again, that's just available up here on this button right here before you do anything else. It's a great place to go. Over on the right side, sort of your user account information. I'm not going to dwell too deep into this, but basically it's just the navigation. So there's the speedometer. It brings you back to the home page because it's pretty easy to get stuck in Sage, to be honest. Click the question mark to find resources. Again, that just takes you to that resource page again. Magnifying glass is good for searching, and then the hamburger button, or those three lines, really control your account, like who are you connected to as far as CoC, your project or agency. If you're an admin for Sage, meaning you control your agency or you control the CoC access to Sage, That's where you find your admin tools. There's also a list of reports available. Depending on your user level, that'll change, but those reports are pretty nice too. A lot of them are performance related. So once you get into Sage, you're going to hopefully see your project name. You're going to see what type of project it is. Hopefully that's correct also. You're going to see a start and end date. Those dates again, no, those dates come from ELOCs. So make sure that they match what you think they should be. And if they don't, then that's the time to start investigating. Talk to the person that uses your ELOC system first, and then the field office may be able to help also. A couple other things. Number one, just pay attention because this is kind of new. Over to the right, there's some performance spotlight, which sort of highlights the project and how well it's working. And you'll see utilization's number one and positive housing is number two. So utilization, again, how many folks did you say you were going to have in your eSNAPS application or some amended utilization? And then what you're actually doing, like how many people you're actually serving. And it gives you that sort of comparison, right? 62% doesn't have a thumbs up. So I'm guessing that's probably not great. Positive housing, that's from that destination. That's got to get thumbs up on this report. But they're highlighting that stuff now. So it's basically telling you this is what you should pay attention to, right? That's what I see when I see something like this. It's like, oh, that's important. I need to make sure it's correct. And then funds drawn. So that's more on the financial side. Equally important, but yeah, for folks that are doing APRs for the first time or just kind of forgot about everything, what I find helpful is there's a view related submission. So what does that mean? That's previous submissions that of APRs for this particular project, and you can view each of them. You see that view next to them, but you can go back and say, what happened last time I submitted this? Like, what were my numbers? What were my explanations? What was my financial report? What did it look like? Like, it's a quick link to your last year's APR, and maybe even the one before it. So you can kind of take a look and, do a cross comparison on how well your project's doing. Again, there's some grayed out stuff here because I'm just trying to keep the actual agency I borrowed this from private. But this just gives you the submission status, kind of tells you where you are. Pretty simple stuff, but it is important, especially if your project gets rejected, right? Then it's like kind of tells you where you are in that rejection phase. So every time you submit or HUD sends it back to you, it's recorded in this status history. So pretty easy to look at. And then you'll see this imported grant information, import complete. So what that actually is your ELOCs report. And the ELOCs is, again, that invoicing tool that you use to get money from HUD for your project. So it tells you what ELOCs has in it. And that's incredibly important if you're doing an APR, because you want to make sure all your ELOCs draws are done, all your invoicing is done before you submit the APR. And the best way to do that is grab that report, which looks like this, and then make sure that your financial people or whoever is managing the financial side of the project agrees with these numbers. And you'll see, there's some general information at the top, but then at the bottom, it shows your BLIs for the CoC program. On the left, it shows what you were originally, let me see. Yeah, on the left, it shows what you drew. And on the right shows what you were initially awarded. So did I spend all my money? Where didn't I spend my money? It's a real quick reference to be able to say, you know what, I don't think we've done all our ELOC draws yet. Let me not do this APR until I make sure that the ELOC draws are done. So this is when you open an APR, this is generally what it looks like. I'm not going through this in great detail, but that first section is just about contact information. Know that there is a performance question in there, okay? And that's a narrative. That's the opportune time for you to tell HUD how awesome your project is, what a great job you're doing, and pointing out some significant accomplishments. Don't skimp on that. Like, it's important. HUD reads it. They definitely read it. So don't just do something easy and say, we operated as normal. No, point out what you did, some great things you did. So the next section is your actual uploads. It's going to prompt you to upload. The CSV file coming out of your HMI system generally is going to be one, but if you do have, like here, a TH rapid rehousing project, you're going to have 2 uploads. So keep that in mind. 2 different projects in HMIS, 2 different uploads going into your APR. That, again, is for your TH rapid rehousing combined component. So also understand with the upload that, again, it's a CSV report should be generated from your system. If you go in there and mess with it, it's probably going to be rejected and not accepted because those CSV files are so easy to corrupt, and it does do error checks on them. Back to navigation. So after the uploads, after you submit your upload, then this APR is going to generate a bed and unit inventory utilization chart. Nothing for you to do but look at this and go, does that look right or doesn't it look right? And lo and behold, there's those 4 point in times, the last Wednesday of each quarter, showing how many folks you had in your project. And the first column is like, this is what I said I would do in my application. So that's where those numbers come from. So they may be wrong, but more likely, like, you probably need some data quality issues going on if these numbers are real low, or frankly, maybe you are below capacity and you need to come up with a plan to rectify that. They will ask you for one. When the field office reviews these, they may see this and go, you got to explain this stuff to me in detail. Like, why is it so low? In addition, there's a new part of the APR. It's not real new, but it's been around for a couple of years. Last year, I think it came out last year. So it's the program eligibility. And what this does is it takes that prior living situation information that we looked at earlier in the APR, and it says, okay, so you had 70 people coming into this program from homeless situations. Those folks are eligible, no questions asked, right? But if you have somebody coming from another situation, it may ask you to explain it, especially permanent situations. So that prior living situation should, to the best of your ability, have accurate data as far as where the folks came from. And yes, you may have somebody that's eligible for your project, but didn't come from the homeless situation. This is just that point in time. Say you went from PSH to PSH, right? A transfer. This is that opportunity for you to say, yeah, that was a transfer from a PSH to a PSH. But you do have to explain this. It is a narrative, is required, and it is new. So new as of last year, I think June 1st, 2024. And I have at the bottom, again, using that question 15 from the APR. Yeah, it seems like I'm missing something, but it's okay. So I'm getting toward the end, 2:20, about the right time. So a couple of tips and tricks. I'm going to go over this for the 3rd time. Don't try to do all the APR all at once when it's due in 2 days. That's just the wrong time to do it. So what you should be looking at is like the cadence. What am I going to do? I'm going to do data quality. How often am I going to check data quality? Well, if I have a big program with a ton of people and they're moving in and out rapidly, I'm probably going to do it monthly, right? If I have a PSH and I'm only having an entry every other month, then yeah, I may only do it quarterly, but I'm going to run the APR. I'm going to run it for the reporting period. In this case, if it's quarterly, for the quarter, right? And I'm going to look at data quality and see where as far as what needs to be corrected, what doesn't look right in my APR. Like, that stuff takes a while, because then you go, oh, this is wrong. Okay, now I got to figure out why it's wrong, right? Got to talk to some more people, got to talk to my HMIS folks, like, what's going on. So it takes a little while. That's why I'm recommending do it constantly. Plus, it's a lot easier for people to remember. Like, if your case manager's thinking about, oh, hasn't seen a client in 9 months, and you start asking them about household size, they may not remember, right? So keeping it up, keeping data quality up, very important. Whoever has ELOCs or access to ELOCs, like, talk with those folks. Make sure those numbers look right? You can see them in your APR, but it doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean you're finished doing draws either. Again, you can go back and look at previous APRs, see what was going on, see some of your explanations, some of your narratives. Use that as a guide for the APR you're doing now. Don't ignore the performance accomplishments. How many times does the field office talk to a provider or a grantee? It's like what did you do? Your performance accomplishments, just say you served the people you said you were going to serve. Like, we want to know what you did. Like, what did you accomplish? What was great about your project? How many people did you house? All the things, right? Don't just let the data tell a story. You tell a story in a narrative, and use that upload test on the login page. Like, anybody can do it. You don't need a login to do it. As long as you can generate that CSV, you can upload it using that upload test. And I think that's about all I have.